The Insta360 X4 is the perfect camera for skiing or snowboarding, but for really cool results it needs some experience and a few tricks. And I promise you, if you implement everything I'm going to tell you in the next few minutes, your X4 videos will look absolutely cool. Let's start with the mounts and which ones are particularly suitable for skiing. The great thing about the Insta360 X4 is that you can achieve great results with just one accessory. And this accessory is, of course, a pole. This also applies to skiing and snowboarding. As you can see, I took these shots here with just a pole. In general, I would recommend two poles for the Insta360 X4. Definitely this standard pole here from Insta360 with a length of 114 centimeters. It's perfect for skiing because it's relatively long when extended, and very short when pushed together, so short that you can easily stow it in your ski jacket. If you are looking for a more robust pole, I can recommend the Action Invisible Selfie Stick. It's made from carbon fiber and is therefore of a higher quality, and it's a little lighter than the standard stick from Insta360. The better material also makes it much more robust and resistant. Unfortunately, it's slightly shorter and slightly longer when pushed together than the other stick. If in addition to a selfie stick, you only want to buy a single mount for skiing, then I would recommend the ski pole mount. By the way, you can find a link to all the mounts and accessories I'm presenting here today in the video description. As the name suggests, the ski pole mount is relatively easy to attach to a ski pole. The selfie stick is then screwed into the mount. The ski pole mount has exactly the right angle, so that you can hold the selfie stick attached to your skis at the right angle while skiing. The key advantage of this is that you can take shots using both of your ski poles. So at first glance, it's hard to explain how you were able to take this shot. It's a super mount that enables really cool shots. It's also small and not too expensive. What's more, you simply attach the mount to a ski pole and leave it there. Personally, I don't remove the mount after skiing, for example. And it doesn't get in the way when you're not using your X4. What you still need is a mount that allows you to film yourself from behind. And this is where it gets a bit more complicated. But I also have to say that I have taken many of my best skiing shots from behind. There are basically two options for recording from behind. The first option is this third-person backpack mount. The backpack mount is attached at the side to the straps of your backpack. You then attach a small carbon pole to the actual mount, to which you then attach the X4. This mount has advantages and disadvantages. It's a little fiddly to attach, which is not always ideal in the cold. On the other hand, you hardly feel the mount when skiing and it doesn't interfere with your movements. It's also easy to stow away when you no longer need it. What I don't find ideal, however, is that the carbon rod is a little too short to get the optimum angle. I therefore usually prefer the second option for shooting from behind, and that is the back bar mount. You attach the mount to your hip like a belt, pull it tight, and then attach the pole to the back. So one of the two selfie sticks I introduced earlier. Compared to the backpack mount, you get a much better angle, as the selfie stick is much longer than the carbon rod of the backpack mount. The mount is also more stable than the backpack mount. On the other hand, the mount is relatively large and somewhat awkward to transport. You need a medium-sized backpack to be able to take it with you. And there is another mount that I would definitely recommend, and which is not only suitable for the X4, but actually for any type of action camera, and that is the chest mount. The chest mount is not the first choice for a 360 camera, but it's also very suitable in combination with the X4 for taking POV shots while skiing or snowboarding. And as you can see here, you can also take absolutely cool POV shots when skiing with the X4. These 4 or 5 mounts get an absolute and unreserved recommendation from me for skiing. For a little more variety, you can also consider one of the next 3 accessories. This includes the helmet mount. The helmet mount is certainly still the most commonly used mount for action cameras, especially for skiing or snowboarding. However, this applies more to traditional action cameras and less to 360 cameras. This is because the X4 is relatively heavy on the helmet, and your helmet has to fit well so that the camera doesn't cause it to slide. Here I have attached the X4 with the same carbon rod that comes with the backpack mount. And similar to before, the rod is a bit too short to get a good shooting angle. Nevertheless, you can still take interesting and special shots with the helmet mount. In my opinion, however, this mount is not particularly suitable for long and frequent shots, as the camera is a bit too heavy for the helmet and the mounting with the rod. It's not really permitted to shoot with a drone on a public ski slope. To get drone-like shots when skiing, you can use the 3-meter long pole from Insta360. The shots you take with it look absolutely cool and are very special. They are very similar to drone shots. Of course, it has to be said that the 3-meter pole is not suitable for long rides either. It's simply too difficult to hold. And it's a challenge to hold a long pole and still ski properly, but the long pole is fine for 1 or 2 shots. By the way, if you use the link in the description for the X4, you will also receive a standard selfie stick and exclusively something very special for free, the bullet time accessory. The bullet time effect is a very unique shot of the 360 cameras from Insta360. And you can of course also use the bullet time accessory for particularly cool shots when skiing or snowboarding. It then looks like this. However, this is of course not a typical mount for skiing. The X4 does not have an internal GPS module. So if you want to display the GPS data such as speed or gradient when skiing, you can use the remote for example. This not only captures the GPS data, it's also ideal for starting or stopping a recording if you have attached the X4 to the back bar mount for example. And just for the sake of completeness, I would like to say that I never use lens guards on the X4, even when skiing. I don't particularly like them, as they can create unsightly lens flares depending on the angle of the light. When I carry my camera in my backpack or in my jacket pocket, I use this rubber lens cap to protect the lenses. Okay, what are the optimum recording settings for skiing or snowboarding? And the answer is not quite so simple. The highest resolution on the X4 is 8K, and only with 8K do you get the best possible image quality. And as you may have noticed, I took most of my shots in 8K. The disadvantage is that in 8K, only a maximum frame rate of 30 frames per second is available. 30 frames per second looks a bit smoother and more natural than 25 or 24 frames per second. But in my opinion, a frame rate of 60 frames per second would be ideal for sports or nature shots. Only such a high frame rate creates this particularly fluid and natural look. But for 60 frames per second, you have to reduce the resolution on the X4 to 5.7K. And of course, you still have to reframe your 360 shots. And since reframing is basically a cropping of the 360 image, this greatly reduces the resolution for 360 recordings in 5.7K to approximately 1080. In other words, Full HD. If you mainly watch your recordings on your smartphone, you can easily use 5.7K 60 as the optimum setting. If on the other hand you attach great importance to high image quality, and like me, often watch your recordings on a large screen, I would recommend 8K with 30 frames per second. And if you want to save storage space, for example because you're on a longer holiday, you can use 5.7K+. The image quality is then better than in 5.7K, but the files are significantly smaller than in 8K. As you will be reframing a 360 shot, the correct field of view in 360 mode is not so important, as you can easily adjust it. Nevertheless, Mega is a good starting point for reframing in most cases. If you swipe from the right edge to the left, you open the advanced recording settings. I usually use standard as the color profile. In my opinion, Vivid contains a little too much saturation. I wouldn't really recommend flat for skiing, as it contains too little contrast and details could get lost due to the compression. On very sunny days, it may be advisable to set the exposure compensation to a slightly negative value, for example -0.3 or -0.7, simply to protect the highlights. I leave the white balance on automatic, which usually works very well. If you swipe down from the top, you open the actual settings menu. I would activate a few features here. To save battery, I always use quick capture and can therefore start a recording even when the camera is switched off. Depending on the mount, it can also be advantageous to control the camera using hand movements or voice commands. This is because you cannot always reach the camera on the mount. For example, if it's attached to the ski pole mount or the backpack mount. In these cases, it's of course also advisable to control the camera using a smartphone or remote. If you swipe to the left here, you can open the main settings menu via the icon in the center. And here too, you should pay attention to two special settings under image settings. For the best possible image quality, the bitrate should always be set to high. This is the only way to save as much data as possible and the only way to ensure the highest possible image quality. Of course, a high bitrate also leads to larger files. Video sharpness is also very important. Digital cameras artificially increase the contrast at the edges to make the image look sharper. Unfortunately, this also makes the image look more artificial and not professional. You should therefore use a maximum sharpness of medium. If you edit your shots in post, you can even use low. In this case, however, the shot may look a little soft and it may be necessary to add some sharpness in post. For a very detailed tutorial on all the settings of the X4, I recommend my video on the best X4 settings. Depending on the situation, it can also make sense to take a single lens shot when skiing from time to time. You don't have to edit it, you can share it immediately, and with 4K 60, you also get a recording in good quality and with an optimum frame rate. But of course, you lose two crucial advantages: the invisible selfie stick effect and the ability to reframe your shot. For these reasons, I rarely use the single lens mode on the X4. Optimal mounts, perfect settings, and you're still not completely satisfied with your shots. I can imagine why. So today I'm giving you 5 crucial tips for your skiing and snowboarding recordings. Some relate to the shooting process, others to the editing process. Perhaps the most important tip concerns the light and contrast. You can of course take cool shots with your X4 in any weather, but for really great shots you need a blue sky and lots of light. So in other words, very good weather. As the snow is already white, a cloudy sky would lead to a total loss of contrast. The shots will look very flat and you won't be able to make out any details on the slope. So if you can, take your shots when the weather is nice and the sky is blue, even if it's clear that you can't control this. Variety is the key to exciting videos. I've shown you several mounts and different shots today, but if you only ever capture one angle and always use the same mount, it quickly becomes boring and you quickly lose the joy of your shots. As you can freely determine the framing in post and also dynamically adjust it during the shot using keyframes, you also have the option of adding a lot of movement and therefore variety when reframing. Experiment a little by zooming in or out more, for example, or by framing the view forwards and then backwards again. If you're using the standard selfie stick, the field of view Mega is already a good starting point. If your stick or rod is shorter, you should zoom out a little further. And a few more tips for reframing. The smartphone app in particular contains a variety of functions that can make your shot look more exciting with just a few clicks. There are predefined movements that you can simply add. So there's no need for complicated editing using keyframes. You can use ShotLab to apply various effects to your shots, such as the sky swap effect here. And of course, you can also have the app create an automatic edit. But if you want to get the absolute best image quality, you still have to use the desktop app, because only here can you select the format ProRes when exporting, which gives you the best possible image quality when exporting your 360 recording. And if you're still not completely satisfied with your recordings, I can highly recommend my detailed video on the most common X4 beginner mistakes, in which I explain the most common mistakes that users make with the X4. Give me a like as feedback if this video was interesting for you. There will be more videos about the X4, so stay tuned and see you next time.